Hey folks, so one of the questions I get asked a lot is what kind of airbrush to use and how to use it and how to clean it, things like that. And I haven't really touched on that so far in the videos, so I thought it'd be nice to shoot a video that talks specifically about the airbrushes and how to use them and how to clean them, which is a big question for a lot of folks, especially when you have something that's gummed up, the airbrush isn't working, things like that. So what I'm going to cover tonight is how to clean the airbrush, what the different airbrushes are, how they operate, and just some general maintenance and some other tips as far as paints and things like that goes. So let's get started with the types of airbrushes first. The two types of airbrushes that you have are going to be siphon and gravity feed. The siphon feed, which is the more common one, is usually the ones you'll find at Harbor Freight or some of the craft stores. Pretty much every company makes one. And those are the type that have a tube that comes off the bottom. And you'll usually either find a bottle or you can actually buy additional cups that act like a different type of airbrush. They plug in just the same as the siphon feed, so they plug in just like normal. You can turn that to the side so it has an uplift to it so your paint doesn't spill out. And that way you can fill up your paint here and shoot it like a regular airbrush. And what that allows you to do is, by having cups rather than the bottles hold a lot of volume, but the cups make it easy to change your paint very quickly. And if you say buy 3 or 4 cups, you can have one for black, one for white, one for colors. When you're ready to switch, you can just simply blow out the airbrush, loosen up your cup, and set that aside, and then you can swap out to a whole different color. And now you're operating on a different color. Obviously, you're going to want to clean out the airbrush between. But that gives you, they work the standard fashion, up and back, air for press. So when you're using a dual action airbrush, which most of mine are, dual action means that when pressing down, that's when it's going to force the air out of the airbrush. Pulling back is what's going to allow the paint to flow. So by pushing down, you're just simply pushing air out of there. And the more you pull back on that trigger, that's going to allow more and more paint to flow. So if you're trying to get a finer, less dense mist, of course you're going to want to pull back less. If you really want to flood the piece, which is never a really good idea, then you would simply pull back more. Obviously, you wouldn't want to pull back a great deal if you're really close to the item, because then you're going to get a lot of overspray. Plus it's going to flood the piece, and it's going to build up. That's when you get cracking, and it's not going to flex really well. It's not going to dry evenly. So better off if you're working with your paints, thin them down to where you're working with a milk consistency or less. So you want them to flow very easily. To test that, you simply mix a little bit up, turn the cup around, and see how it moves around the cup. You dip a toothpick in there or something like that, and see if it runs off the toothpick. If it does, you're probably pretty close. If it drips off of it fairly easily, then you're looking at some good mixed paint, whether it's acrylics with water or airbrush medium, or using the Createx line, which is the one I prefer, and then using their line of reducers to thin the pigment down. Now, the next type of airbrush is going to be the gravity feed, and that's where the cup is on top. By having the cup on top, you have a couple of advantages. Number one, it doesn't require as much air to force the paint out of the airbrush. And the reason why is the paint naturally wants to run down with gravity. Whereas with the siphon feed, you're actually having to pull that paint up through the airbrush, or through the cup, through the tube, and into the airbrush. So on most mixed paints, you're going to find that the gravity feeds are going to require somewhere around 15 to 30 pounds of pressure to push the paint out of the airbrush raw. Whereas with a gravity feed, if the paint is thinned out to a proper viscosity, it's going to take somewhere along the lines of 8 to 20 pounds of pressure to get that same amount of paint out of the gun. So number one, you're using less air pressure, which means your compressor runs less. Number two, you can actually see down the cup into your needle, and you give a better view of where you're cleaning. Whereas with the gravity, or with the siphon feeds, you can't see the needle, you can't see what's going on inside the airbrush. So it's a little bit more difficult to make sure you're cleaned out, which just allows you to, the gravity feed just gives you a few advantages as far as being able to clean them better, to view what's going on in there. You can also siphon back into the cup to mix the paint a little bit or to clean it, and I'll show you that in a little bit. But those are the generalizations between the two. So gravity feed is going to be easier to load small amounts of paint into. It's going to require less air pressure, and it's going to be easier to clean. So, and you can find most of these in pretty much any brand. Badger, Posh, Iwata, which is what I'll generally talk about here in my shop because that's what I use. You can also find off-brands on eBay and things like that. But for the most part, you get what you pay for. The main difference between price and the airbrushes is going to be fit, finish, and precision. Those are the three things you're going to find. So with the cheaper airbrush, you'll find that the trigger tends to wiggle back and forth a little bit. It's got more play in it before it actually activates. The needles are not going to be polished, so by having a polished needle, the paint isn't going to have as much of a tendency to stick to it. It's going to want to flow off of it, and so you'll have less trouble cleaning it. With a needle that's not polished, there's going to be little pockmarks and grooves in there. They're going to be microscopic, but that gives the paint somewhere to grab onto. So a more expensive airbrush is going to have a polished needle. It's going to have finer points. So typically you'll find that the standard airbrush starts at a 0.5 millimeter, and that's pretty large for airbrushing. You can actually cover large areas of canvas or leather, whatever you're working on, with a 0.5 and really flood the surface. The next one down is where the Iwata Eclipse starts, and that's pretty much the general workhorse that most airbrush artists use or prefers in that range is going to be 0.35. The next one down is going to be getting into the professional series and the micron series, and there you're looking at 0.22, 0.20, 0.17, very tiny needles. They're designed to make very fine lines, get into make some really nice details. They use very, very, very fluid paint, so you're mixing a lot thinner. So they do take a little bit more practice to use, and they don't cover as much of an area. But the precision is much higher, and they typically, when those airbrushes, they have to be milled to more exact specifications, and so you're going to get a lot better fit. You're not going to have as much leakage, things like that. So again, price dictates quality in this case. Not everywhere, but in airbrushes it definitely does. But any of the major brands, Badger and Posh, all have their high ends as well as Iwata does. And there are a few other companies out there that do it as well. So on to the next thing is going to be protection. I like to wear gloves when I airbrush, just because it keeps the mess off my hands, and it makes cleanup a little bit easier. It also allows you can spray on them if you need to. You're not getting a lot of cleaner on there. And when it's cold, it helps keep them warm a little bit. Breathing, you definitely want to have some kind of a mask when you're airbrushing, because even if you're not using something that's catalyzed or used as a solvent, like acrylics or Createx water bases, you do still want to have something to protect you from those particulates, because you are spraying something that you're atomizing and then pushing against the surface. And what that causes, no matter how small of an area you're doing, you're still going to get some blowback. You're going to feel that air. And so regular dust mask is okay, but it's not going to filter out everything. The next step up is going to be something like an RZ mask. These are really nice because the filters has a two filter system, and the filters are replaceable, and they're very comfortable. They come with just a Velcro thing, and they just slip right on, and there you go. They're very breathable too, so I can actually wear this for hours. They're fairly reasonable for about $23 on Amazon or through Coast Airbrush. Gets you the mask, a replacement filter, and a nice little carrying case for it. So definitely worth the $20. You'll also use it for woodworking, metalworking, and other areas. So it's not like it's going to be specific to this, and you can use it quite a bit outdoors or gardening, whatever. So on to cleaning. Now with cleaning, it's pretty straightforward as far as what you do with the airbrushes. Your tip and your nozzle are going to be up here, so obviously you got to expose those. The first part is going to be your needle cap, and this first cap is literally just to protect the needle from damage when you're moving it around, bouncing around. So you can take that off, and when you take that off, you can see just a little bit of the needle sticking out. So you want to make sure not to bump that against something. You can, when you're airbrushing, you might get what's called needle dry or tip dry, and that's just where, as you're airbrushing, you'll get a little bit of a buildup on the tip of the needle as the air passes over and dries the paint out. You'll notice that the airbrush doesn't quite spray as well. Sometimes it might take a little bit more pressure to push that same paint out, and it might even start spitting. If that happens, just take that protection cap off and use a little wipe or even your fingernails to just pull that paint off, and that'll usually do it. If it's really built up, then a wet paper towel will work, or you can use something like this, the Studio Wipes by Art Tool. They work really well, and they have an airbrush cleaner already on it, so you're actually cleaning the tip off with those wipes, and you just simply wipe it off, roll it around a little bit, and clean that off. So the next stage is going to be the fluid nozzle, and you can take the needle out beforehand. If the needle is jammed in there because you've let your paint dry in there and it got pretty dirty, or if you had some residue and it got in there dirty, you don't want to go yanking that needle out. So what you're going to want to do is first run some cleaner through there. You can use water to start with if you're using acrylics, or just a little bit of a reducer if you're using Createx. I just run a couple drops of reducer through there. Helps loosen up the needle and break up any buildup that might be in there. So just a couple drops, and you're going to take the back end off, and this exposes the needle chuck nut here. So you just twist that, and if it doesn't come out right away, then just simply pull the trigger back and forth with that cleaner in there, and you'll find that after a second or two, it just slides right out. And you'll notice that there is a little bit of residue on there. So we're going to put this somewhere safe, off to the side, so we don't bump it. Make sure that needle chuck nut is back on there, and then you can take the tip off. Oop, if it gets stuck. This one's a little too tight. Just take a pair of pliers and just give it a gentle turn, and then do the rest with by hand, because you don't want to tighten these too much because you can burn the threads out. But once you take that off, that's going to expose the fluid nozzle. Okay, with the fluid nozzle, that's held on by this last cap here. And you want to be careful because some of these are compression fit versus screwing in. We'll show you one that screws in a minute. But you take your little wrench here and undo that. And this is a compression fit. This is the Iwata Eclipse. And so you'll see that once that cap's off, the fluid nozzle is exposed. And this is a compression fit, so it literally just sits inside a well, and that nut, that cap holds it on. So if you just take it and wiggle it a little bit, it'll break free and it comes loose. Okay, leaves the well. You can see how that fits in there. Okay, so set that aside. And now you've pretty much broken down the front end of your airbrush. And you can take a look and see down inside there if there's any paint inside the well, and just check the general operation without the needle in there. How does the trigger feel? Is it flow? It's a little sticky there, and we can clean that up. But for the most part, it works pretty well. So we're going to leave that. So as for cleaning, now I do recommend. There's a cleaning kit that Iwata puts out, which is this nice little handy box. And inside the box, you're going to get some wool pipe cleaners and an Iwata nozzle tool for the nozzles that thread in, magnifying glass, and some lubricant for the needles, and a package of the Studio Wipes. So usually what I will do is I will take one of the wool pipe cleaners. Oh, and my favorite thing The kit comes with one of these, and I found that actually all they are dental brushes. They're dental flossing brushes. So you can actually go down to your local Walgreens or CVS or whatever, Walmart, whatever it may be, and the gum brand works really well. They make 3 different sizes. You want to make sure you buy the ones that don't have any fluoride or chemical on them. And so with those, you can actually use those for cleaning your airbrush. And they work really well because they fit inside. The smaller ones will actually fit down in some of the nozzles. But for cleaning, literally, you're just going to take a little bit of cleaning solution or reducer on that. You're just going to run it through the front nozzle just real quick, just to make sure you don't have any residue on there where the nozzle chucks in. And make sure you're coming through the cap. Watch out for the wire end because you don't want to scratch the inside of your cup. You can clean the inside of the cup by just curling that up and then using it as a brush to brush out anything on the inside. It makes a nice little handy tool. So once you get that part clean, we're just going to check the rest of the cups, make sure that they don't need to be cleaned inside, and if they do, just bend that pipe cleaner a little tighter and you can use it to clean the inside of your cup out. And same thing with this one, just check. This one's just mainly for air, so usually will not have paint in it. If it has paint in it, then you have a larger problem. We'll talk about that some other time. Now, these little tips with the actual fluid nozzles, they're fairly small, so you're not going to be able to get much in there. But some of the smaller floss picks, which I don't have, will actually fit most of the way in there. And so you just want to swirl that around and pull out any residue paint that might be in there. These nozzle tips are actually meant to be replaceable. And so they run, it depends on the brand, but they usually run between $8 and $15. And you'll find that probably, if you paint a lot, that about every 3 or 4 months, depending on how much you use it, if you're more of an occasional user, maybe once a year. But it's just better to just have one on hand if you need it, because they can get quite gummed up. Just blow that out. And you should be able to hold that up to the light and see through it pretty well. And if you can't, there's something lodged in there, but you can keep cleaning. And once you can see light all the way through, and it looks pretty clean on the inside, you're just trying to get any residual paint off the sides, because they will affect how the paint flows through there. And sometimes you'll see that you get a spray pattern that instead of being a nice cone, it might have one flat side and one cone side. And that means you have something in there that isn't allowing the paint to hit the nozzle evenly. And so that's why you want to clean these out. If they're really bad, you can actually set them overnight, and they're made out of brass, so they're not going to corrode. You can actually just get yourself a little cup of cleaner, drop it in there overnight, and usually they'll clean out most of that gunk, and then you can kind of either blow it out or try cleaning it out again the next day. The last piece is going to be our needle, and this is where we need to be careful. We do need to make sure that all of this gunk that's on there comes off. So that same pipe cleaner, you come off the back side, not towards the tip, because you don't want to break that tip. And you're going to just run it on up and down the needle. Clean that all off. Get the most out of that pipe cleaner as you can. And you can spin the needle around. Once you get to the tip, you can spin it instead of running this up and down, because you want the needle tip to get stuck in that and bend, because then you need a new needle. There is a tool called Sharpen Air that allows you to resharpen needles. It's great little thing. At the end of the video, I'll post links to all the stuff that I mentioned here, so you can find it easy and pick some up if you want to. But just check the needle, give it a good visual. Now once you clean the needle, inside this kit is a bit of what's called super lube. And you can take that and just drop a little bit on your needle here. Literally just a drop. And just coat the needle there. And what that'll do is that will keep paint from sticking too much, and it'll allow it to flow through. So you reinsert the needle. Obviously you gotta loosen up that chuck nut. And I usually just pass it through to make sure it's not sticking anywhere. So when you put it in, I would say basically put it to where you can see the point inside the cup, but not all the way through, because as you put these fluid nozzles and chucks back on there, you don't want the needle sticking out. But this will keep it safe while you do all this, and it's not going to roll around. So first you're going to put your fluid nozzle back on. Remember, it's compression fit, so it just needs to sit in there. You can take the cap for that, put it back on. Now once you get it tight, just give it a nice little, about a quarter turn, not much, maybe an eighth. You don't want to make it super tight because there is going to be a rubber gasket in there. And then you're going to reinstall the second cap, the air nozzle, and last but not least, your needle protection cap. Once you get those back on, just make sure the nut is loosened, push the needle all the way in until it connects, and then tighten that nut back up. And it should work pretty well. Nice and smooth, returns easily, and your airbrush is clean. Now for those really tough jobs where you can't really get it clean, but you know it's just paint in there, there is a product called Restorer, and this is a little bit more heavier duty. You don't want to put it inside the airbrush. What you're going to want to do is put a little cup out and drop any parts in there to soak overnight. Mainly like the fluid nozzle, your fluid caps. You can actually, if you get something long enough, you can put your needle in there. Just make sure to protect the tip, either with maybe a little piece of cork or leather, anything like that. Something so that the tip doesn't impact the bottom of the jar. And that way you can soak it overnight, and the Restorer pretty much cleans off everything that way. The danger in running it through the gun is, if you don't have solvent resistant bearings inside the airbrush, it could eat those bushings, the bushings back here where the needle flows, when the needle runs through and stays tight. If the Restorer gets back there and you don't have solvent resistant bushings, it could eat those up, and then you get a loose fit, and you'll start to get blowback into the gun. So better to take everything off, dip it in the Restorer, let it sit overnight, clean it off, put it all back together. For acrylics, typically you're going to rinse out your airbrush with water. If that doesn't do the trick, then this product, Airbrush Cleaner, which is the 5618 by Createx, works really well. It's got a little bit of a detergent in there. It's not a solvent, so you're not going to have to worry about getting on your hands or breathing or anything like that. It's basically mainly a mix of propyl alcohol and methoxy. So, you don't want to breathe it in or swallow or anything like that, but it has almost no fumes. It makes cleaning real easy, especially for acrylics, because it'll work well with the acrylic base. Water base also works well with the Createx paints. And on to the next. So on the next type of airbrush, which is like the Revolution, the Neo, and a couple others, they are going to have a tip that screws on. And you can try and use a little wrench for that, which comes with the airbrush. It works fine, but I found that it's actually pretty easy to lose those tips. And so Iwata has this neat little tool that's literally just for removing the nozzles. You can buy it separately, or if you buy the cleaning kit, it comes in with the kit. And it literally just slips over the nozzle and allows you to untwist it. Taking these things off isn't the big deal. It's A, not losing them, and B, reinstalling them. Reinstalling them with your fingers and with a little wrench is a pain. So this tool actually holds the tip nice and sturdy. It protects it so it's not going to bend or break the end of it. And when you go to reinstall it, just tip the airbrush up. And once you get it aligned, it threads on pretty easy. Here's the tool, and there you go. So definitely worth. I think by themselves are about $16. If you buy this kit, it's about $24, and you get all the extra stuff. So the kit is definitely worth the money. So you get that little tool, and it'll help you with the threaded on fluid nozzle airbrushes like the Neo, the Revolution, and a couple of others. So just a little handy tip there. Now I know that some of you are on budgets and you're just starting airbrushing, so you're not quite sure if you even want to stick with it. And you might be thinking, well, heck, that the Revolution and the Neo are $75 to $100, and the Eclipse is $150, and they go up from there even. The Micron that I have retails at around $500, so it can get expensive. It's just like leatherworking; it's an addictive hobby, and as you get into the nicer tools, they get more expensive. You can find cheaper alternatives on eBay and Amazon, and while I don't think that they'll be the last airbrush you'll ever use, they will definitely work as a starter. Same thing with the Harbor Freight airbrushes. Definitely not the last airbrush you're going to want, unless all you do is spray dye fades. If all you want to do is do a brown to black fade or light brown to dark brown fade, those airbrushes work great, and they will serve your purpose forever. There's no doubt about it. I bought this Badger back probably 10, 12 years ago, and that's all it's for. I bought it. I started airbrushing with it a little bit, and ended up buying some more expensive airbrushes. So this turned into my dye fade gun, and that's literally all it does is spray dye fades, and it's been doing that for 10 years. So if you take care of them, they will last, and you don't need an expensive gun for that. This is one of the airbrushes I found on eBay. It's obviously a clone of the Iwata Micron. It's got all the same features as far as the built-in MAC valve for adjusting your air. It comes with the air filter, the quick disconnects, which are nice. I have those, if you notice, I have those on almost all my airbrushes. And the quick disconnect, what that allows you to do is you put the female end on your air hose, the male end on your airbrush, and it works just like the quick releases at an auto mechanic, where it just plugs right in. When you want to remove it, it comes right out. These are great. The quick connects are great for when you're swapping out airbrushes. If you don't have a large manifold running 6 airbrushes at a time, maybe you have 2 airbrushes and 1 hose. You can change them in and out real quick. I have quite a bit more than that, but I only have 1 hose, so it makes it really nice and easy. The inline air filters are nice because then you know that you're not getting water up into your airbrush. It's not going to contaminate your paint. And if you ever need to expel the water that builds up, the condensation that builds up in there, there's a little needle valve at the bottom. You just simply press it, and it releases the air. And it makes a nice little handle for when you're spraying. So I have that on some of my brushes, not all of them. It just depends on the airbrush. But these are around about $24. It gives you a nice chance to try something that's a little more precise. They do have their issues being a cheap knockoff, but they do have all the nice features. That gives you a chance to try out a nicer airbrush and see if you like it, and then you can always move up to the precision one, the more expensive precision ones later on if you decide to stick with it. I used these for quite a while before I moved up, and so nothing wrong with them. Definitely a good place to start and get used to it. And as you get better, you'll find maybe you need a little bit more, and so you buy a better airbrush and you keep collecting them like that. But in the meantime, some of the features on the nicer ones, especially like the Micron that I use. Here, I'll put this one away and show you the better one. And again, the difference in price is going to be fit, finish, and precision. The Chinese knockoffs like that one there that I found, it works fine. But again, it's got a little bit of play in the trigger. The needle isn't polished. I found when I'm trying to convert from the 2.0 to the 5, I'm sorry, the 0.2 millimeter needle to the 0.5 millimeter needle, I'd have even more issues. The fit wasn't just perfect. Whereas something like the Iwata Micron, I don't have those issues. I can change in and out. Everything fits. Everything's precise. They even tell you that if you need to get it serviced, they take it down to a local dealer and have them do it, because they're made very precise. You don't take them apart as much, and you really don't need to, because you're working with much thinner paint that cleans off much easier. But you can see, I don't know if you can see that in the video, but you can see how small that needle gets. This is a 0.2. It has a MAC valve on the bottom, and so this is for adjusting air at the gun, and allows you to, tighten up and lower your air pressure. You can increase your air pressure. So you would set your compressor to the max air pressure you would need, and then you use this inline valve to adjust it down to your working pressure. Again, this one has air filter to it, quick release, and then this knob back here, you might be wondering what it is. This is a trigger stop. So basically, as you're working with it, you can pull you back your full trigger distance by tightening this up. If you want a little bit more control without having to worry about, oh, I accidentally blew out all this paint when I'm trying to get a precise line, you can actually tighten this down to where the trigger moves very little. And so that way, if you're working on all precise lines, you don't have to worry about your trigger traveling back and forth if you move too far, whatever the case may be. And then when you simply need more paint volume, you just simply untwist it, open it back up, and you've got your trigger back. So it's very handy to have. This is one of the more expensive ones. This is the Micron C, and I absolutely love it. It's my favorite airbrush, but they definitely cost more, and I find that it's worth it. Okay, so now we've gone over cleaning and the differences in airbrushes. Now talk real quick about paint, and that's about it. One other little item is a clean out cup. This is for when you're cleaning your airbrush and you need to blow out fluid. You actually just stick the end of the airbrush, obviously it's got air hooked up to it, but you stick your airbrush into the tip and then blow it out. And this little filter up here keeps the paint from coming back up, and it collects inside the jar, and you can dump it out at your leisure. But you can set that on your desk, and you can just simply clean out as you're working. It makes it real nice. As far as paints go, the two paints that I have used and recommend for airbrushing, and that you can use pretty much straight out of the bottle, are going to be, this is the acrylic version, so this is the Golden High Flow. These are really nice, but they are acrylic, so you're going to be using water or airbrush medium to thin them. They tend to dry a lot faster, not only coming out, but also in the cup, so you have a lot less working time with these than you do, say, with the Createx. With the Createx, they're straight out of the bottle into the gun version would be the Createx illustration colors, and these are great because they're literally the consistency to airbrush straight out of the bottle. You don't have to worry about thinning them or doing anything else to them if you don't want to. You can thin them, and the nice folks over at Createx made one reducer that works for pretty much everything. There's different grades for automotive and things, but for general airbrushing purposes like we do as leather workers, the 4012 high performance reducer is literally just the thinning agent for their paints, and it works very well. It also makes a nice handy little starter cleaner, so you can dump a little bit of that in there and clean out the airbrush after you finish your colors. Above the illustration colors, so these are the thinner, ready to spray out of the bottle. The next step up would be like the Wicked and Wicked Detail colors, and these are a little bit thicker. You can actually brush paint with these if you wanted to, but they work better obviously out of an airbrush. You'd want to mix the reducer in there to get the consistency that you want, but they're going to be a little bit more pigment loaded, and they work really well on pretty much everything. You can use the Wicked paint line on leather, t-shirts, airbrush shoes, wood, metal, plastic, as long as you're applying a base, whether it's a sealer or a plastic sealer, or metal sealer, whatever the case may be, a primer, these will spray right over them with no problem, and they tend to hold up. Wicked is one of the paint lines that many professional automotive airbrush artists use, including Corey St. Clair, Jason Tooney, and a bunch of the guys that taught me everything I know about airbrushing at this point from the higher end. One of the other things that I use quite a bit is going to be the Autoborn Sealer, and this is literally like a surface primer for pretty much everything. I use it on leather. There's folks that spray entire cars with this as their base coat over metal, and it's a nice foundation. It is a little bit thicker, so you're definitely gonna have to mix it again with the 4012. And with this one, I reduce it about 25% to use on leather, because you want it a little bit thinner so that it actually gets in those grooves and those pores of the tooling, and so it sticks. On the bottle it says 10%, but after talking to folks over at Createx and doing my own experiments, I found that 25% mix of the reducer works a lot better, just for leather purposes. And then for the Wicked line, if you wanted to have a little bit more stability, say maybe your piece is going to be exposed to the elements, or it's going to be used outside where there's UV rays, rain, anything like that, the 4030 mix additive, it's an additive that you would add to the paint, and literally this is about 10%. So you would reduce your paint to the consistency you want, and then just figure about 10% of the 4030 in there. And what this does is it converts your water-based paint into a urethane type paint. So it's going to hold up a lot better into the elements. It's going to have a little bit more flex to it. It also allows it to flow out of the airbrush a little bit better. And this is very important when you're using candies, which the candy line, which is called Candy 2.0. These are true aniline dye based candy colors, and I'll just put a drop out here. You see, they're highly transparent, and these are great for when you're wanting your airbrush effects like flames, things like that. You can spray down your base colors, whether it's white or red or whatever, and then spray the candy over that, and it'll create this this almost like glass-like tint once the sealer or clear coat is over it. If you've looked at my galleries, you've seen like the hot rod flames that I've done on a couple of pieces, and those are all done with the candies. With the candies, you're going to mix anywhere between 30 and 50% of the 4030 in with the candy. You mix those and you let it sit for a good 5 minutes. You let it kind of cook a little bit. You don't need to reduce it, but you can if you want to. You can experiment with that a little bit, but for the most part you don't need to reduce it. You just simply add the 4030 to the candy, let it cook for about 5 minutes. And when I say cook, you're letting it mix and settle and get a good dispersion of the two products in there, because what that 4030 does is, by doing that additive, what it does is it gives it more of a stained glass effect. The candy by itself is basically just a tint, whereas this is going to give it that glassy effect, so that once the clear coat goes over it, it gets that high transparency and pulls through. It works really well when you're shooting over black. So if you shoot, say, white paint over a black surface, and then you shoot your candy over it, all the white areas are going to be transformed with that candy color. Anything black is going to stay black, because that's what's showing through the candy. But your candy literally is like glass once it settles. So we'll go over that in another video. Just want to kind of introduce you to the paint line. So we're looking at the Autoborn Sealer for your base coat. The Wicked colors, or the illustration colors, are going to be your paints, and then the candy color, the Candy 2.0, is going to be for special effects. We'll also talk about hot rod flakes and pearls and the difference between them. And we'll do some other techniques like erasing back, saving the white colors, how to do your coating, things like that. But for right now, I think that pretty much covers the airbrush video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, and I will see you next time. Thank you.